Welcome to the church family that is lifting lives through living love, inspiring hope, filling with faith, and transforming our world. These recorded messages are made available so that you might have additional opportunities to stay connected with us, and then you might learn and grow in your faith. God bless you as you hear the word today. And now, the message.
If you could do it, I suppose it would be a good idea to live your life in a straight line, starting, say, in the dark wood of error, and proceeding by logical steps through hell and purgatory and into heaven. But that is not the way I have done it so far. Often, what has looked like a straight line to me has been a circling or a doubling back. I have been in the dark wood of error any number of times. I have known something of hell, purgatory, and heaven, but not always in that order. Often, I have not known where I was going until I was already there. I have had my share of desires and goals, but my life has come to me or I have gone to it, mainly by way of mistakes and surprises. Often I have received better than I deserve. I am an ignorant pilgrim crossing a dark valley, and yet, for a long time looking back, I have been unable to shake off the feeling that I have been led. Make of that what you will.
Well, we are about 3/4 of the way through our Disciples Path series, and today we're talking about service. We talked about prayers, presence, and gifts in the past 3 weeks. I almost forgot the third one, the gifts, but prayers, presence, and gifts. Today we want to talk about service, and to begin the message, I want to share with you a story from Matthew 20 of when Jesus is approached by the mother of James and John. The mother of Zebedee's sons came to Jesus with her sons, and kneeling down, asked a favor of him. "What is it that you want?" he asked. She said, "Grant that one of these 2 sons of mine may sit at your right and the other at your left in your kingdom." "You don't know what you are asking," Jesus said to them. "Can you drink the cup I am going to drink?" "We can," they answered. Jesus said to them, "You shall indeed drink from my cup. But to sit at my right or my left is not for me to grant. These places belong to those for whom they have been prepared by my Father." Now when the 10 heard about this, they were indignant with the 2 brothers. So Jesus called them together and said, "You know that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their high officials exercise authority over them. Not so with you. Instead, whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant, and whoever wants to be first must be your slave, just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many." In addition to that story from Scripture, I'd like to share with you another story called Hope for the Flowers. It's a book by Trina Paulus. Those of you who've worshiped with me at St. Luke's, you may have heard me talk about this story before because it's one of my favorites. I came across Hope for the Flowers when I was in college and in a ministry, and we read it as a ministry group. It was written in the 1970s, as I said, by Trina Paulus, and it has, you'll see, it has kind of a 70-ish, hippie-ish feel to it. It's an animated book, and but it's not written for kids, trust me. It's written for adults. So the story is about a caterpillar named Stripe, and just to warn you, I'm not going to read every word on every screen. Just kind of follow along the pictures, and I'll summarize if you would. So one day, Stripe emerges from his egg, and he says, "Hello, world. It's sure is bright out here in the sun." And Stripe's not really sure what to do with himself, so he begins to eat and eat and eat and eat, kind of like the Hungry Little Caterpillar book that we all grew up with. He eats and eats and eats, but somewhere along the way, Stripe thinks to himself, "Is this all there is to life? Just endless eating? It's getting dull." And he decides there must be more, and so he finally leaves the plant on which he was born to seek out that more. Now, along the way, he meets some other caterpillars, and they're all climbing up this gigantic pile into the sky. He doesn't know what's up there. It's too far. It's hidden in the clouds above him. But he figures if everyone's pressing to get to the top, maybe that's where the more is. And so he joins the other caterpillars in the pile, pushing his way to the top. But as soon as Stripe joins into that tower, he discovers the climbing is not so easy. I mean, it's kind of one of those climb or be climbed upon kind of things. It's a fierce competitive sport. But Stripe gets used to it. He learns how to do it. And it turns out he's bigger and stronger than some of the other caterpillars. And he can make his way up the pile pretty fast. Until along the way, he steps on the face of another caterpillar named Yellow. And something about the way Yellow looks at him makes him second-guess himself, who he is, why he's climbing this tower. Surely this can't be right, he thinks. And so he and Yellow make a mutual decision to climb down the tower together. And so they end up at the bottom. And for a while, the two of them are incredibly happy. They couldn't be any happier. They're just the two of them just kind of snuggling with each other endlessly. But again, that feeling starts to come back to Stripe. Is this all there is to life? Isn't there more? And he finds himself slowly drawn back to that tower. He never did find out what was at the top. Maybe the more that he's searching for is up there. Maybe he was foolish to give it up too early, too quickly. So he goes back to Yellow and he tells Yellow, I have to go back. I have to see what's up there. I can't not see. But Yellow won't go with him this time. She says, I've done it. I've been there. I can't do it with you. If you go alone. And Stripe says, so be it. And he sets off alone. Yellow is heartbroken, just heartbroken. One day she's going for a walk when she comes across another caterpillar. Except this caterpillar is doing something strange. He's kind of up in a branch and he's spinning a cocoon. She says, what are you doing? And he explains, well, this is what we're supposed to do. We spin this cocoon and we become a butterfly. Well, how do you do that? Well, the other caterpillar explains, and Yellow decides to give it a try. And I love how it says she got up there and she says, imagine, I didn't even know I could do this. I didn't know I could make a cocoon. If this is inside me, then maybe the stuff of butterflies is inside me as well. And she spins her cocoon and waits. Meanwhile, Stripe is climbing that tower. And now that he's cut himself loose from Yellow and all sense of compassion and loyalty, he is ruthless on that tower, and he climbs even faster than before. He pushes his way very quickly all the way to the top. But once he gets to the top, he realizes that this is not what he thought it was going to be like. When he looks out at the landscape, what he sees is nothing but other towers, an endless landscape of towers of caterpillars. Is this it? Is this what I pushed to the top to see? He's discouraged inside. He finds himself barely holding on because the people underneath are wanting to throw him off to get the same view. And just when he's about to lose all hope and let go, just then, a commotion happens. A beautiful yellow butterfly arrives and flaps close to the top of that tower. Stripe doesn't know how or why, but he knows this is Yellow. And even though she can't speak to him, there's some kind of difference in language now between the two of them. He asks Yellow, how do I become that? And she just looks at him and he knows the answer, senses it. Climb down. And so he begins to climb down, except now as he climbs down, he's actually filled with hope. He says every caterpillar he looks at, every caterpillar he sees in a different light because there's the stuff of butterflies in all of us. He's a bearer of that message. We can be butterflies. We can be more. And I love how he says this last line. It's a little fuzzy. He says, as he heard his own message, he realized how he'd misread his instinct to get high. To get to the top, he had to fly, not climb. So I find this book so profound in many ways. It describes a couple of different shifts that we all experience in life. The first shift I describe this way. It's a shift from consumption to achievement. Stripe is born, right? And what does he do at first? He just eats and eats and eats and eats. But the whole time he has this nagging feeling there has to be more than just eating. And we feel that too, right? At some point in our lives, we recognize that just being cared for and provided for isn't enough. Like just consuming and consuming and consuming. No, we have to make something of ourselves. We have to do something with this life we've been given. And so we make this shift from, I don't want to just consume my whole life. I have to achieve. I have to accomplish. I have to do something. But then much like Stripe, we discover that the path to achievement is often a competitive path, isn't it? Like, there's only so many spots on the team. There's only so many lead roles in the play. There's only so many admissions at the college you want to go to. There's only so many hirings that the company is making that when you first apply. Like everything is competitive, and so the way to achieve is often to do better and even maybe sometimes step on those who are around you. I think this is why in our culture today we love the series, the HBO series Game of Thrones so much. And yes, I know I just made a big jump from Hope for the Flowers to Game of Thrones, but it's because this series gives us a picture. Like that's what that competitive picture is. It's stomp or be stomped upon. Power is a zero-sum game. If you want to get ahead, then that means someone else has to be left behind. We feel it, don't we? This need to achieve, this need to get ahead. And so each of us picks an arena where we have natural inclinations, where we can achieve something, improve something. And for some of us, that might be in the realm of sports. For others, it might be in academics and school, like we can get that A. For some of us, it's in business, that we can be successful. Some of us, it's more about personality, that we can be popular, we can charm everyone around us. For others, for some, it's religion. But that could be a tower of power too, right? Like some people, and I would raise my hand here, are just good at being good. And so they start, doing all the things that religious people do and doing them better than all the other people and slowly kind of building their spiritual resume and pushing to the top. In Jesus' day, those who were in the top of the religion tower, they were called Pharisees. They knew the law inside and out. They practiced the law better than anyone else. They were perfect when it came to the demands of the law. And yet they were the ones that Jesus criticized most frequently because they misunderstood religion in some ways. Instead of loving their neighbor, they were just trying to be better than their neighbor. And they used all these measuring sticks and they got it wrong. In Matthew 6, Jesus kind of attacks them. He says, be careful not to practice your piety before others, because then you get your reward. He says, don't be like the hypocrites, because when they give money, they sound the trumpet real loud so everyone can see, because their giving is not giving out of faithfulness or gratitude. They're not giving for those purposes. They are giving so that everyone will know how much they're giving. They're trying to climb that tower. And the same way when you pray, don't pray like the hypocrites, don't pray like the Pharisees, because they pray these long, flowery prayers, and they don't really want to be heard by God. They just want to be heard by other people who can be impressed by how beautiful and flowery their prayers are. You see, you can take any of the 5 things that we're talking about in the path of discipleship: prayers, presence, gifts, service, witness. And if you're not careful, you can make them into a checklist, a competitive sport. I'm in church more than you are. I pray more frequently than you do. I give this much. Did everyone see how much? We can start checking it off and making it competitive about climbing to the top of the tower. We all have a little bit of Pharisee in us. We have to be honest about that with ourselves, that all of us on some level want to be right. All of us like to be preferred. We like to be on the top. So what do we do about that? I'm going to skip ahead to our scripture reading today, Matthew 20. As it says, one day James and John's mother approaches Jesus, and she has a request. When you get to your top of your pile, Jesus, when you establish your kingdom, will you please give seats to James and John so they can be at the top, the position of influence and power along with you? Will you do that? And you can almost hear James and John, right? Can you imagine them? I mean, just think about it for a second. Your mom making that request, they had to be so embarrassed. Like, Mom, don't do that. I used to feel that way whenever, I remember as a kid going through a drive-thru, whenever the thing was wrong, and Mom would go into, the order was wrong, and Mom would go into the Hardee's to tell them about, and meanwhile, my brother and I in the car, just hiding, making ourselves as small as possible. Like James and John had to be so embarrassed. But Jesus, he plays it cool. He's not mad at their mother, because he has a mom too, and he knows moms will be moms, that he knows that every mom thinks their kid is the best and they deserve the best, and so he interacts with her. Now, the place where Jesus gets frustrated is with the disciples, the other 10. Because as soon as they hear this request that James and John's mom had made, suddenly they feel like they're being shorted. Why do those two get to positions of authority? Why shouldn't we get there? And so suddenly they're arguing among themselves about who gets those seats. And Jesus calls them together and he says, whoa, come on, guys. So he pulls them together and he says, you know how it works in the world. You know how the Gentiles, the Romans, how they practice authority, that the people are on top. They look down upon everyone else. They stand upon them. He says, you can almost picture, Jesus, wasn't using Trina Paulus's imagery, but you can almost picture those towers, those pillars of caterpillars. Come on, guys, you know what it's like in the world. The people on top stand on the people below them. And he says, but not so among you. Not so among you. Instead, in my kingdom, the greatest will be the one who is served, and the master will be the one who has become a slave. Climb down, Jesus says. The pathway to significance in my kingdom is not found at the top. It's found at the bottom. For the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. Follow my lead, Jesus says. Years ago, Bob Buford wrote a book called Halftime. And it's written for those who are kind of making a transition to the second half of their life. But I've always found it instructive. He describes a second shift that we all have to make in life. The first shift, I said, was consumption to achievement. But Bob says we spend the first half of our lives focused on our success. But then the second half of our lives, we begin to think about significance. And so for me, this is a second crucial shift from success to significance. It's not that achievement is wrong or bad. I just want to ask the question, who does your achievement serve? Who's it for? If it is only for you, only for your own glory, your own advancement, so you get to be at the top, it has no significance. It's empty. It will die with you. But if your achievement serves others, if it makes the world a better place, then it has significance and meaning. To use a different book, Henry Cloud in his book Integrity, he makes the argument that every person, he says every leader, but I would change that to every person, because every person, as they move through life, as they move through the world, they leave a wake behind them. He says, some leaders, they achieve great things, right? They hit all the goals, they surpass all the quotas, but they leave a wake behind them of injured bodies, people who've been snubbed and hurt and diminished and damaged. He says, but that's not the way all leaders work. Some leaders, they hit their goals, they achieve their marks, and they leave behind them a wake of blessing, of people who are thankful to have worked with that person, of people who have hearts of gratitude for the blessings they've received. And Cloud basically asked the question. He says, we focus so much on achievement, on how far we're going to get in life. He says, but that's not the measure of a man or a woman. The true measure is the wake. What are you leaving behind you as you pass through life? Today is All Saints, and it's a time for us to reflect on our wake. We lit candles for 35 individuals today. And no doubt, I hope, as we were lighting these candles, you also thought of saints that you have in your own heart, in your own life. And we all swim in their wake, right? Not that the wake they left behind was perfect. None of us are perfect. But every single one of us, we leave something behind us. And these folks have left behind them, a legacy of faith and hope and blessing. What is in your wake? Are you leaving behind a legacy of hope and blessing for others? That's why we're having a ministry fair today. It's not just that we need volunteers for all those ministries, although every table, I'm sure, would be happy to have your support. It's because the path to significance, Jesus says, is by service. And it doesn't matter where you serve, because we all have different areas of gifting and expertise. I mean, some of you might serve by singing, like Amy did during our offertory. It might be by playing an instrument, or it might be serving in our tech booth, or it might be welcoming people, or some of you may say, I'm not an extrovert, I can't be in front of people, I need to serve more behind the scenes. But I guarantee, wherever you serve, it's a pathway to significance, because as you begin to serve, you begin to make connections, you begin to discover a purpose for your life that you didn't even know you were missing beforehand. This past week, a friend of mine from St. Luke's came and took me to lunch. He had a health scare a few years ago, one of those really scary health scares. Like, health scare doesn't quite encompass. He was in ICU for weeks. Doctors told him it's a miracle he lived. And so he calls that event, that moment, he says, that was my mulligan. Now I have a new chapter on life. And every time he talks about it, he tears up. He says, I want to make it count. And so what John has started doing is he started reading at Fox Hill Elementary School near St. Luke's. He goes in one day a week and reads for an hour or two with different students that the teachers say need help kind of catching up. And then he goes to lunch with the kids. He says it's so interesting when they go to lunch because all the kids are fighting to sit with Mr. John. He says, I'm not that nice to him. He says, I'm actually like I demand respect. I treat them well. He says, but I think a lot of it is for a lot of these kids, they don't have kind of a firm or affectionate father figure, male figure in their lives. Anyways, he had been doing this for about a year, and the teacher, one of the Scholastic Book Fair came around, and the teacher gave the class a challenge. If every student in this class buys one book, then we're going to get this prize as a classroom. And afterwards, John went to the teacher and he said, hey, I heard your challenge. Aren't 80% of our kids in this school, in this classroom, on free and reduced lunch? And the teacher said, yeah. He said, then how are they going to each buy a $5 book? It's impossible. She said, yeah, I know, but we try to give the challenge. We want to encourage kids to read. And John said, he is just on his heart. He said, well, I'm going to buy a book for every kid in this classroom, which he did. And the next year rolled around, and he thought to himself, one classroom is not enough. We need to do all of second grade needs to get books. And so he started contacting some of his friends who could help him do this, and he put together, kind of cobbled together a coalition of people who could provide books, and that was a good start. And he says, and then just when he was feeling good about it, he woke up in the middle of the night in a sweat, and he felt this word from God saying, you got to hit the first graders too. You got to start earlier. And so he went to the church and the United Methodist Women, and they wrote a grant, submitted a grant, and they matched his money, and so he was able to provide books for the first and the second graders, for the whole school. And the teachers had kids write thank you notes to him afterwards. And that wasn't why he did it. And he wasn't telling me this story because he was, patting himself on the back or anything. He was telling me with tears in his eyes about one little note that a girl had written said, "Someday I hope to be like Mr. John. I hope to be able to help others too." That's the shift from success to significance. I skipped over one little part of the book. Yellow goes to when she meets that other caterpillar making her cocoon. And he says, "How do you do this?" And this caterpillar answers, "Well, you have to want to fly so much you're willing to give up being a caterpillar." "You mean to die?" Yellow asks. "Well," the other caterpillar says, it might feel like death. You have to let go of everything. But life is not lost. Life is changed. See, the thing is when we start climbing down, it might feel like death. Because we have to die to something to climb down. We have to die to our need to be first and on top. We have to die to our need for glory and attention. We have to die to our need to be right and in control. But it's not truly death. Because when our death is united with the sacrifice of Christ, we find life that is everlasting. And so my challenge to you is to do what Jesus told his disciples to do in Matthew 6. When you give, don't tell anybody. And when you pray, don't say a word. I know it's so easy sometimes to tell people, "I'm praying for you," but how many of you have said, "I'm praying for you," and then forgot to pray for them, right? Instead of doing that, why not pray for someone and not tell them until after you've carried them for a long time in your heart, and then you can tell them, "I've been praying for you the last month, the last 2 months." Give, serve, pray. Do it without telling anybody, and you'll feel some ego in you rising up saying, "Hey, I need attention here." But let it die, because in that death, there is life. So Stripe climbs all the way down the tower. And by the time he gets to the bottom, he's worn out, confused, and not sure what to do next. And for me, this is such a beautiful picture, not just of a life of service, but of the legacy, the meaning of all saints. So Yellow comes to him. And even though Yellow can't communicate in words, Yellow shows him the cocoon, and Stripe figures it out. And so he climbs up himself and takes his place alongside her. And he spins his cocoon, and he lets go of everything. And then Yellow waits and waits until one day